Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Milan podcast. We had to let our special guest today know that was the name of the podcast because he thought it was a totally different one. But Santangelo is back as per usual. And our special guest as of today, if you are active on Twitter/X and you do follow a lot of Milan accounts, you would know who this is. We're just going to call him Saj today because that is his name. But first, Santangelo, how are you?
I'm doing well. Last day of work before a long extended vacation. So hopefully, Milan can start my vacation off with a victory, which we'll get into. But I'm doing well, man.
Yes. And then Saj, obviously we've been friends forever at this point. It's predating COVID at this rate. I remember when you initially were on Twitter, you had the Bart Simpson, right? Wasn't that your profile pic?
I change it every season just to keep it fresh.
Well, anyways, how are you? I think people for the first time certainly are hearing your voice. I know what you look like and what you sound like. Obviously, like I mentioned, but it's great to have you on. You're probably one of the more popular individual Milan accounts on Twitter at this rate. I think you definitely have more followers than Matt and I. I can't really think of too many others, especially English speaking. So
they used to be, but a lot of the accounts have gone dormant. Does that make sense? But yeah.
It's true because I look at like certain analytics and it says I'm at 12,000 followers already, but it still shows 11,800. So that shows how well Twitter works these days. But yeah, so your background is very interesting regarding Milan, right? And we'll get into the Dortmund Champions League and all these other topics, but I just want to talk about you and your fandom for a bit. You started watching a little bit later on, like early 2010s, if I'm correct, right?
I became a religious Milan fan really later on. So once I started uni pretty much. So that's when I got influenced by my friends who were watching English football, but I really couldn't identify myself with an English team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. Well, because you were born in Italy, though, right?
I was born in Bologna, but my ethnic origins are Sri Lankan. So yeah, if it's not clear enough, my accent's kind of all over the place at the moment. So it's not really Italian, not really Sri Lankan, not really English.
Hey, listen, again, you speak more languages than the average American does, so don't even worry about it, bro. But yeah, Milan in general, so you've had kind of a wild ride at this point, so you don't remember too much of the glory days, if at all, or religiously, like you mentioned. So unfortunately, the best days you probably have seen have been in the past couple of seasons. So which has obviously been a roller coaster from the Scudetto, obviously just missing out with Inter that 1 year as well. And then obviously last year's a disaster. And where we are this week is probably one of the lower moment weeks that we've had since, especially since Elliott and Redbird have taken over. So we'll get into the Champions League match, fellas. Saja, I know you were able to watch this one and it did not go well. I was working. I was just getting FOTMob updates. So from my perspective, it was very frustrating. I was pacing back and forth at work because there's also like Premier League fans and all that. And I saw we got rewarded the penalty. Giroud ends up missing it. He's missed his past two in the Champions League. He missed that one at the Diego Maradona Stadium. And then afterwards, not too long after, like 4 or 5 minutes after Milan concede a penalty and Chukwueze levels it. He finally does something. I thought his goal was fantastic. I was able to see that. And then everything unraveled. So, Saj, I'll start with you. What did you see from Milan in this that just kind of just makes you feel like nothing is going our way at this point? We're not even mentioning Chow was out and we had to bring in Krunic was the first option off the bench as a center back. So not only have Milan been weak defensively, they really imploded at this moment. So do you think this was just something that was bound to happen with the way Milan have been playing in recent weeks?
This is really nothing new now at this point. It's been the case for the past 2 months now, 2 full months now, where we've been playing really badly. In the last 2 months, since the start of October, basically, we've won 3 games. The only good game we won was the PSG one, but the other 2 games was the Fiorentina game last week, which was another snooze fest, where we won by just by penalty. And the win before that was the Genoa shit show, if you don't mind me swearing. And that was another horrendous display of football. So just 3 wins in the last 2 months. It's just disappointing to see.
And Matt, not all against top teams. We're also talking about losses against Udinese, who were easily the worst squad in Serie A besides like Empoli this season. Milan come out flat in that one. So like the form has been terrible, as you know. Did you get to catch much of the Dortmund match at all? Like what were your kind of takeaways from that?
Yeah, I caught pretty much most of the first half and then a little bit of the second half until the third goal came in, and I was like, all right, that's enough. We're down to our Rade Krunic and center back experiment, and I was like, at this point, we're not going to do anything. No Rafael Leao, and yeah, I think look, I hate to harp on it, and I hate to continue to fall back on the earlier results in the group stage, but that's ringing true here. I mean, you look at the fact that we're still mathematically still capable of advancing to the knockout stages, despite how poorly we've played, despite how many points we've dropped. But I always go back to the first 2 match days where the first game against Newcastle, if you're thinking an extra 2 points there, well, now the conversation's much different heading into St. James Park, right? Where you maybe only need a draw, or, you maybe not even need to win. You can just get a goal or maybe draw, right? So like you really don't need too much. But now all of a sudden Milan needs a victory against Newcastle, who, shows they can play at a high level in the Champions League at least. And they need help from, what is it? They need Borussia
Dortmund needs to beat PSG and Milan needs to win. Yeah.
So like every time you do this, we had a similar scenario a couple of years ago, right? When we had the Porto, Atletico Madrid group, Liverpool, where we're like, we needed a win plus something else in that final match.
I think it was a draw between Atletico and Porto at the time.
Right. And now all of a sudden you put it in the hands of other teams, and we were on the outside looking in and we didn't advance, right? So like that's kind of where the conversation is, that Milan were playing in those first 2 games. Their overall form was pretty strong, right? And I know we talked about the last 3 wins we've had over the past 2 months, but around that time of that Genoa game, we were still playing pretty well in the Champions League. We were getting results in ugly fashion, and we didn't take advantage of it in the Champions League. I think had you taken advantage of it in the Champions League, the conversation would be a little bit different heading into some of these other games. But now we need a boatload of help in this. I mean, God forbid we finish 3rd. Now we're in the Europa League. And I had a conversation briefly with someone on Twitter, and they were saying, like, you don't really hope to not compete for a title. We don't have the capacity to compete over two fronts here. We simply don't. We're lucky if we can compete in top 4 and get that. So that's kind of where my head is at. And I mean, look, we all know that the squad is, better than it was last year, but the conversation's been stemming around the medical room being filled with new players every week, key players being out for a sustained period of time. Kalulu's done. Malik Chow's out for a couple months now.
Yeah, which we'll
not back today, but look where we're at. Like it's a dire time for us. We're in a crisis.
I want to give some credit to Milan, though. That said, because even though we've been playing badly in the league, I don't think we really played that badly in the Champions League. The first game against Newcastle at home,
no, we were fine.
We were dominating. We should have won that game. Yeah. Even the game at Dortmund, I think.
Second half was very good. The second Adley was subbed on. You're right. Yeah.
Even the Dortmund game this week, I think Milan went really shy. I think we did go for it, but just all went downhill the moment Thiago.
They're playing more cautionary football, and they knew that. See, like in those other games, we kind of had this sort of aggressive mindset and wanted to set the tone. 20-something shots against Newcastle. I don't know, Rafa had that missed chance in front of goal. And the Dortmund game, you make a great point. Like away, we played pretty strong. So we left so much out there in those first 2 games that I think in this match, given the injuries we've been facing, the turmoil around the future of the coach, we kind of played a little bit more timid, and we were thinking, well, let's just try to get a draw and keep this thing in front of us. And 3 goals at home is pretty poor.
Yeah, I don't think we were as bad as last season where we got trashed by Chelsea, for example.
Yeah,
and kind of, frankly, lucked our way to a Champions League semi-final. Does that make sense? I think this season we played much better, and it speaks volumes somewhat that we're still in contention to qualify for the next round.
Yeah, the best Milan could do at this point is second place in the group. So obviously that's Listen, if they could still do it, I don't think it's completely out of the question. Benacer is not going to be able to get called up to play in that one. I think as long as you have Loftus-Cheek, Musa probably, and Reinders as a midfield 3, and then you can get Leao back somehow, and Giroud should be good, and probably Pulisic will play on the right wing, considering form, but who knows with Chukwueze right now. For that, I think that you can get a win at Newcastle, especially with the way we played against them. I don't think it's completely out of the question, but the real question now is Milik Chow. We say he's out for weeks here at the bottom. There's even more reports saying that his season could be over if it's more severe than they thought. He has to get reevaluated regarding that. But he was leaving the San Siro on crutches, I believe. So again, and Chiara has a muscular injury, and we'll get into what the Frosinone preview is as well, and who's going to be potentially playing there, and what Pioli was alluding to in his press conference today, telling the media that they didn't know about, a formation that he tested. Great job. So Stefano cracks me up sometimes with that kind of stuff, because it's like, okay, if you didn't want the media to know it, then why are you saying something like that? It's just silly. But yeah, Chow's out for weeks. I'm sorry. There's too many muscular injuries where it's not just strictly on one person with this, right? The strength and conditioning coaches. It also has to do with the workload and the schedule that FIFA give these guys, UEFA as well. You could blame. There's so much stress and tension on them. But if we really look at it, and what Sempre Milan put out with that, and this was also just a podcast or two ago, Matt, when we were discussing how Milan's unique injury combination goes up to 24 total players. Some are repeat players that got hurt more than once. But 24 injuries, and that was at that point. When you combine Inter and Juve, they're 17. Like, that just shows you that it's not just, and people are, and Saj, I know you get this because your account's massive. Matt, you're not as active as you used to be. So thankfully, you don't get too many idiots. But you see it time and time again from other fan bases saying, like, that they don't think it's unique to Milan, but it is. The numbers are telling you that. The data is telling you that. The types of injuries that are happening to these players tell you that. And we almost had this scare where Tomori almost came off the pitch as well. Thankfully, he's okay. But even then, you see the report saying, like, Tomori's going to need some rest. But he can't rest. They don't have anyone for that. And that's a real big problem. And that's why they're in this crisis right now, because one of my biggest question marks for the club coming into the season, and I think we all agreed on this because I've talked to the both of you like separate conversations, was the defense. And now the defense basically has nobody depth-wise, especially center backs. What do they do? How do they survive this? They're fortunate that the Serie A schedule is a little bit weaker, but we know how Serie A is, and we know how Milan are against sides like this. And Frosinone is no joke. We'll get into them soon. But my goodness, Saj, like, how does Milan not even consider making a change with training? Like, right? I'm not saying I don't want people to lose their jobs, but someone's not being held accountable here, and that's a massive problem.
I've got interesting stuff for you. I'm not sure if you've seen it. AC Milan Data posted it, and it's basically recording the number of games missed through muscle injuries since Pioli's staff came into the squad. I'm not sure if you've seen it. But
was it like a graph with like multiple? Okay, yeah.
Yes. So, for example, the 3 seasons before Pioli's staff came in, we had in 1920 we had 42 muscle injury games missed due to muscle injuries. The season before that, just 44, and the season before that, just 49. So it was around the 40s, the number of games missed due to muscle injuries. The season Pioli came in with his staff, that season straight away that's the one. We had 86 games missed, then 94, then 105, and we're already on 50 this season. This is not normal, and I think it might be purely staff at this point.
I also think this is. I agree with that. I think it's purely staff, but also at the same time, Milan's style of football is high pressure. Lot really intense sprinting. You saw how Leao got injured, right?
Because Leao and Chow got injured.
He's coming up lame, trying to. And lame just means like, as in like he pulls a muscle. It's just a term being used, guys. Please, like I'm not, So with that, like muscular injuries are going to occur more often when you play like that because of how often you sprint. what do you make of this? Like what do you even do? Like what's your idea for the solution? And by the way, look at 2022 right there, 23 with 105. Like that's like what are your thoughts on this? Like this is clearly abnormal. I don't even know how people argue this.
It's it is too. It's a miracle that Milan were able to win the Scudetto in that season with 94. Right? I mean, like people will say Inter bottled it and they slipped up. I mean, when you have 94 games missed in total from muscular injuries, I mean that kind of in my view mitigates any sort of argument that people have that Inter bottled it when we have guys on the sidelines every game. I mean, you see who we're trotting out there. Not only is Simic potentially going to get called up, he might just start. Like this guy might just be starting significant games this year. We're not far removed from Camarda being a starter. Like we're really not. Like, if Giroud gets injured, knock on wood, but if Giroud gets injured, now it's just Jovic and Camarda. And I don't know about you guys, but you kind of just throw probably Camarda out there because he's fresh and he can offer you something different maybe, but that's kind of how dire it is. And I think something has to give here. I'm not saying that it's a Pioli thing only. I'm not saying it's only his staff. Correct. But you can't simply keep trotting out the same sort of plan and strategy and implementing it when it's not working. Something has to be done to at least give this to the fan base saying, hey, look, we understand that there's a problem with the muscular injuries. We understand that there's players being banged up and all that conversation. But at the end of the day, someone has to be held accountable. And if you're not going to fire the coach due to results and due to this, because he's owed $4.5 million over the next year,
and other options just not really existing. If
right. So what do you do? Like, I'm not saying that they're not having these internal discussions regarding making changes and trying to find a solution to these injury problems. But 12 games become 18. And before you know it, we're into the dog days of the season and nothing's changed. And now we're going week to week and we're kind of holding our breath. Like, who's next? What key players next going to be out for the remainder of the year?
You hope it's not Tijani Reinders, who's been playing so often.
The midfielders are too, especially like those box-to-box guys that are covering tons of ground. And, you mentioned Chow and Rafael Leao pretty much picked up their injuries in identical fashion. The sprints, like Leao had a ball played in by Tommaso Pobega. He was sprinting, all of a sudden grabs the hamstring. Then all of a sudden Malik Chow is running, hamstring. Like, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physio. I don't know the solution, but I'd like to think this huge organization that we have here, all these new American minds, all these new people in here with the algorithms, like the algorithm, give me something, give me a solution here because this ain't working.
I know people say that we sign injury-prone players like RLC and
your brother, for example.
which is fair, but at the same time, did you know Benassem Maignan had no injury history before joining us?
Correct. No. That was a point made.
Kalulu, your Kalulu is concerning. What's happening to Kalulu right now?
Yeah, I mean, Kalulu is another one. I don't think Tomori had an extensive injury history. Even Leao too. I mean, obviously he's been here for years now, so it's a little different. But these guys don't have a history of it. And these are things, it's one thing where you're like Roma, where like 17 different players are tearing their ACLs. That's at that point, I just think you're cursed, and you just have to get some Buddhist monks to bring some sage and get the evil spirits away. But listen, there is a consistent issue here, and the fact that like someone was arguing with me, shocker. Someone was arguing with me over this point that was saying that the players weren't prepared for this, and you can't blame the manager and you can't blame the trainers. You never played a sport in your life, and you should shut your mouth because you truly don't know what you're talking about in that sense. It's not always on the players like that. There are certain instances, like if you want to talk about Pato's story, Pato highlighted it, and he talked about how he didn't take his recovery seriously. These guys come back and they take their time, and even certain things like Maignan last year, guys. How does he was supposed to miss like 3 weeks. The guy didn't come back till like March or whenever it was, right? Remember that? Like, you know how long that took? You realize like there is something wrong with that. Players complain about the training grounds at Milanello as well. There's so many different things that have happened over the course of the past couple of seasons, and I think that graph perfectly highlighted it. So transitioning from some of the negative stuff, to more negative stuff. So Paolo Maldini finally comes out, pretty much just like a tell-all situation. This was to Repubblica. So with Maldini in this interview, he basically highlighted so many different things: the transfer markets, winning the Scudetto, obviously Redbird ownership going from Furlani, even back to Boban being mentioned, and Elliott. So initial takeaways, Saj, from this. There's never really a good time to come out and talk about your former employer and how it went down, especially this situation and this guy and what he means to the club. What were your initial takeaways from his comments? I know there's a lot to take in from what he said, but was there anything that you were overly concerned about in what he said regarding ownership or just the overall situation?
I'm glad he's finally spoken up, and I'm glad it's not right after getting sacked. So it's more of a calmed down critique of what has been going on. That said, I don't think it's also specifically targeted at Redbird or Jerry Cardinale. Maybe he's pretty much, he was talking about his time with Elliott as well.
Yes.
And what concerned me was how not hands-on the ownership has been, if that makes sense. I have so much to say about this because it's also
well, that's why we have a podcast, so go for it.
That's true. Basically, I still can't get my head around the fact that Jerry renewed Maldini for 2 years plus an additional one.
Yep.
If we didn't have him in his long-term plans, so I'm struggling to really try. I'm really struggling.
Well, even the communication part. If I just want to help you out with that for a second, right? Like where Maldini says, like, I sent him 4 texts. Like they barely talked. Yes. So how is that possible to have that amount of, I guess, bad blood between the two? Maybe that's a little bit exaggerated, but clearly the working relationship is not great. And then there was even the comments afterwards about Furlani and how Furlani and him didn't get along. And then Scaroni's also saying things like, oh, we're more serene as a group without Maldini here. And it's really a backhanded comment. And to me, I think that's widely disrespectful. I don't even think, even if this had nothing to do with football, right? Talk about normal average employment, right? You don't do that and say that about, but it's just not a classy thing to do and say, especially publicly. So with that, and then Maldini's comments about Scaroni leaving the matches early is pretty funny. I just think that just makes Scaroni more of a Milan fan than anything, because some people turn off the games. But yeah, I mean, listen, that's a fractured relationship, and for something like that to be released publicly doesn't help Redbird in this scenario.
I don't think we got an answer for why Maldini specifically got sacked, if that makes sense. Could it be the Ketelaras signing? Could it be Pioli's signing? For example, Pioli's renewal. And
he mentioned Masada got fired too. So remember when the initial report said that Masada chose to leave. So the wording and phrasing of that and how that went down is still different. So because we heard Masada is leaving because Maldini is leaving. But the way Maldini was saying this was that Jerry sacked the both of them. So kind of turning into he said, she said type thing in the media, which is never great. And that's usually how these things go. Yeah, I don't know what would have gotten him fired, because it was interesting. He also, again, there's Matt, and we'll take it to you here. He mentioned how he was supposed to present a plan on how to win the Champions League, and he did that, and he had a friend apparently as a consultant to help him do that. That person has not been identified, so I have no idea who it could be. So him and Masada had to come up with this plan. I mean, bro, they were cutting costs like Maldini mentioned, and they got to a Champions League semifinal. Doesn't matter the path, how you got there. They still made it there in spite of all of that. So the sacking has to come from a standpoint of ideology, right?
Yeah, I think it's just a clashing of mindsets. I think, look, Maldini's always going to do his job with the best interest of Milan. He's not going to, it's not like, you're getting some outsider here. I mean, this is Paolo Maldini. He's got, red and black embedded in his DNA. This is, when you think of Milan, you think of Paolo Maldini, right? So him stepping in as a director and winning, a Scudetto as a director, and that's such a highlight as a Milan fan to see. Like, it feels a little bit more different and special given the journey we got to that point, yes, but also the guy in charge getting us back there. And I think, that's kind of the one thing I've always tried to approach with the whole situation is, you can make your case about, some of the decision making from Paolo Maldini on the market, whatever the case may be, right? The move didn't work out, but I think he makes a pretty valid point in, these players need to be, nurtured. They need to be given that opportunity to grow and all these sorts of things. And we were singing the same tune about Rafael Leao the first year. We were like, there was conversations that he could have been sold, and we were like, let's give him one more year, and he had the breakout year, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, look, when you look at what Maldini did as a director here, I think knowing what he did and then reading what he did in his conversation to almost sort of support his job and what he did, it looks so much more impressive than when I just read it. I'm like, whoa, the wage bill much better, the Champions League, three straight Champions League
after not making it for 7 years,
right? After not being in the competition, right? Then you have the semifinal run, then you have a Scudetto, and then you get all these top players, the value of the squad itself, improving almost tenfold. And you think, and people still, again, people can have their opinions. I know a lot of people are trolling the Carloses, the Mujas of the world. I get all that. But I think when push comes to shove, given the budget restrictions that Maldini and Mazzara had at their disposal to build a winning team and to get the players they did, it's impressive. You can say whatever you want about, oh, well, I read, he wanted Arnautovic and Berardi, but he also wanted other players, and he was consistently told, no, we're not stretching our budget. How many times did we see Milan linked with a player that Maldini, Moncada, and Mazzara really liked, but they needed to hit a different number, and we couldn't hit the number. We don't have the budget. So at the end of the day, like, they're only working within the parameters of what they have with their budget. And you're starting to see here, I think the timing of it's interesting. I know people are playing conspiracy theorists and saying, it's ironic that he's coming out now and saying when Milan are in such a, difficult state, we were having negative results.
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly.
We were playing poorly anyway. But I'm happy that Maldini spoke out. Truthfully, I love Maldini for what he's given to this club over, decades and as a director. And I'm not going to sit here and be one of those fans that, spits in his face and criticizes him, because I think he always has Milan at his best interest and at heart. And that's kind of how he ended it. He goes, this isn't going to, ruin my relationship that I've had with Milan. I love this club. And he, kind of ended it in a way where he almost said, like, but the legacy of the club, the importance of the club, that also needs to be considered, and that also needs to be respected. And I think that was kind of putting a bow on it, thinking, like, just remember what club this is and remember how look how it's being treated.
Saj, I think the only comment I would say that Maldini said that was like kind of incorrect was regarding the budget, where he said that it doubled after Furlani said it wouldn't. Paolo, I love you, but they sold Tonali for like 70 million. That's why the budget doubled. It's not because, like Jerry said, here, take more money.
I would counter that. I would say our budget was about 50 to 70 million plus the sale of Tonali. So the budget before that could have been 25, 35 plus the sale.
I think it was just going to be the same as it was the summer prior, right? With like the CDK, like 40 million, 50,
45 to 50.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think Maldini was kind of right in that, because it could have been 35.
I see what you're saying, but I don't know. I think a little bit differently. And it's funny, just by the way, a report that just came out from Sky saying that one of my Milan's ideas is to recall Matteo Gabbia on loan from Villarreal. So that would be interesting.
He's been doing good, in Europa League specifically.
Yeah, that's where he's getting more minutes. He doesn't start regularly in La Liga, so maybe we'll see something a little different there. But any final thoughts on this Maldini thing? I did find it interesting about his possible new job that he just kind of like brought up. And he also, like, maybe you guys didn't take away the same way I did with some of his comments. He kind of like left it like he opened the door to hey, like eventually things could change down the road. I'm not saying no to ever come back to Milan. Just kind of like how he was saying, like Saudi Arabia might be interesting. Going to another European team might be interesting. Obviously, there's the rumors that Manchester United were the only other team that I saw that's not an Italian team, because he said he's not working for another Italian team. I don't know. I think this does ultimately put more pressure on management and ownership at this point, because I don't think Maldini looks bad here at all. I don't think how he can look negative in this scenario. I think he gave a fair assessment of what happened. I think he gave mostly facts with this. And again, I think he left it to a part where he didn't criticize someone enough to the point that there's bad blood with it. He was just kind of like, hey, this is what happened. I tried talking to guys multiple times. I did everything that they asked, and I was still shown the door despite all of that. And Matt, you're 100% right. If you went through a checklist of every single thing that guy and that management accomplished before and after, and we were Maldini defenders for a big time. I know most of us were. Again, ignore the Twitter trolls with that. We're not saying he's perfect. Certainly not. But I think he did far more good than he did bad. And I think that viewpoint of him after he got sacked was really skewed by a good amount of people, and I thought it was unfair.
I also think too.
Go for it.
I'm not going to say that the players felt a certain type of way about his dismissal. They're professionals; they have a job to do. We've seen certain instances this year. The social media posts where players are shaking hands with Furlani, like everything's good and all that stuff. But I mean, just reflecting back on that, on that announcement of his dismissal, I mean, you saw with some of the social media posts. Some of them were more so thanking Maldini, like Theo Hernandez, obviously his relationship with him, and Mike Maignan. But even like Rafael Leao, where he was doing like the whole like I'm not going to say anything, and like you're not going to hear about it now. But I think have maybe a player leave in the summer, maybe like a Theo gets sold or Maignan gets sold, I'm sure that's going to come up in some sort of conversation where like, dude, did the impact of Maldini leaving, leave a mark on your time at Milan? And the players revered him. They respected him so much that I think even in difficult moments during the season, he felt like one of the leaders in the locker room still. You saw him after the Scudetto, right? Like he was in the locker room with Ibrahimovic, and that felt like he was like living vicariously through that team because he's experienced such highs with like the players have. So I think there's that sort of connection that, if we're being honest about the entire situation that we're in with the team this year, we're lacking that. I know Pioli saying, I have the trust of the players, and, the players are showing up to do this, that, and so on and so forth. But we're still missing that presence in the locker room, or even that is talking to the players on a consistent basis on the training ground, like Paolo did, about, what he could do to help and how involved he was in the day-to-day of what Milan was trying to achieve in that Scudetto season. I still think truly we're missing that element on this team. And that's why I think in a lot of these games, we struggle with the mentality. We struggle to stick in and to really get the results that we need, because we're faltering in a lot of these games where a couple of years ago, where the going got tough, we kind of stuck together.
Like the 2-0 blown leads that we've seen so
right.
far.
We were bending, but we didn't break. We were able to, like, the 1-0 games, like, defend our asses off and get the result. This year, we're succumbing to a lot of the issues we have with injuries, but also poor play, and we're losing these games. And I think that really feels like it has a difference on this team versus previous ones.
Saj, any other final comments on this Maldini topic, or anything regarding the management or this situation in general?
I would say, despite how much I love Maldini, Milan does come first. So if we do end up winning the league or doing really well this season, it's only good news. So
correct. I agree with that.
There's weird people in the sort of Twitter space with Milan where they'd rather see the team lose just to suit an agenda. Oh, well,
yeah,
I hope we lose so Pioli gets sacked. Well, that's kind of ass backwards. That's stupid.
Yeah, no,
like it's
not
just
a good thing.
If Pioli wound up navigating the season and we somehow get top 4 and we get out of the group and we make, I'm gonna be happy with that. I'm not gonna be well, Pioli's the coach, so I don't like it. Like, that's stupid.
I agree. 100%. And I think that's I'm not trying to tell people how to be fans, but I think that's the correct mentality to have. I'm not saying you have to like every player. I'm not saying you have to like every manager, director, any of that. What I am saying is I think you should want Milan to win every single match that they play. And if you don't do that, I'm questioning your fandom. And I'll be blunt about that, so I don't mind. So speaking of matches, tomorrow, Frosinone, Milan. Frosinone is a good, fun side to watch. If you are an avid Serie A watcher, Mattia Sule from on loan from Juventus has been definitely the young player of the year so far. I would say in Serie A, I think he's been widely impressive. He's really carrying them. Di Francesco being back in Serie A is also fun to see in that sense. Just in terms of like his historical significance, I guess you could say, from Sassuolo, obviously what he did at Roma, and then over here. This is a tough side, and they're not going to back down. Milan have a ton of defensive injuries. We don't know for sure just yet. The rumors are that Simic is tipped to start. There are some positive things to come from this. I do think you see Francesco Camarda actually get minutes in this one again. I think he'll come on a little bit earlier. There's no doubt in my mind that Luka Jovic starts. I don't see how there's any other way Pioli would bench him with this. We're at San Siro. This is, again, a must-have 3 points. There's some big matches within Serie A as well this weekend that have implications for top four. I do believe Milan will eventually right the ship and finish top four. We'll see what happens. Hopefully they don't finish in Europe. I don't think they can. Well, actually, they can finish in Europa League if it's a draw. But hopefully they don't. I really don't want to see them in that competition. But as far as Frosinone goes, most of the starting 11 that you saw against Dortmund is going to be for this game. Matt, Frosinone is not easy. Do you trust this defense if Simic starts in this one?
No. And that's no indictment on Simic. I think we saw some good things with him in the preseason, but it's a different animal, different expectations, different pressure to play to. We saw Pellegrino, right? Pellegrino was a small summer signing, and we had injuries mid-game against Napoli. He comes in and he looked not ready. He did not look ready. Of course, he gets injured. Of course he does, right? So when you kind of put everything in the pot here, given our form, given the uncertainty with the coach's future, the results being very lackluster, for a while now, as Saj mentioned, 3 wins in 2 months is simply unacceptable for a team that has ambitions to do what we want to do this year. Yep. I just don't feel good. I mean, I've been trying to lean in the way of saying, despite some of the issues, we're going to find a way to just rise above it, and we're going to get a result. It might not be the sexiest result, but we're going to get a result. And that's what I thought about in the Lecce game. We spoiled it. That's what I thought about in some of the other games surrounding that. And we just haven't done it. I can't give this team the benefit of the doubt any longer because of the injuries and how much of a toll it's taken, but also the mentality is not there. A lot of the players that were, achieving great things a couple of years ago, the Teos of the world, some of these players are just not playing at the same level. Even Mike Maignan, I know he saved us in the Fiorentina game, but he's looked more human and more, good, average most times this season versus previous ones. And you kind of throw everything together. Like, how much more can you put on Mike Magnan's shoulders to save us when the defense is going to be under pressure? The midfield, hasn't been the same, bar a couple players maybe here and there. Like Ruben Loftus-Cheek has probably been our best midfield this year. Reinders has fallen off a little bit. He had his goal against Lecce.
I think he's going to be exhausted, man.
Like this team is depleted of not only its players, but just energy. And in some of these games where it's like, this guy's got to play the full 90 again. We don't have the luxury of depth that we thought we were going to. But I've learned long ago that no matter how much depth we get, we don't have enough with this team to overcome with the medical issues. With all that being said, I see more of a draw in this one. I mean, I think Frosinone are a team that they have this little bite to them. They're newcomers to the league or returning club to the league. But I think at the same time, they know they play a pretty good, attractive style of football. They know they play a style of football that can garner goals, chance creation. And I think they're going to seize the moment. They're going to look and think, man, we really have Milan in a bad spot here. We're going to go after them. We're not going to sit here and play, this pragmatic style of football. We're going to go at them, and we're going to try to score goals. And if we lose, we lose. Like, but we're going to go for it. And I think that's what Milan are going to really struggle with. So I'm actually going to go probably a draw here, and that's probably me being generous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Saj.
Yes.
Go for it. Everything.
I think a lot of people are underestimating how good Frosinone is. I'm not sure if you've seen the table, but they're just 2 points off of Atalanta and Fiorentina, and 3 points behind Roma and Bologna, surprisingly. Also, they sit above Lazio, so they've been doing really well this season. That said, they've been on a roller coaster of a form at the moment, so hopefully that should bode well for us. They're one of the best attacks in the leagues. Surprisingly, just 2 behind Milan, 2 goals less than Milan, but they have one of the worst defenses.
Well, not that surprising with our finishing, but yeah,
Yes.
I get your point.
The X factor for me for this game, though, is I believe Pioli beat Di Francesco 7-1 with Fiorentina, or do I recall?
Yeah, that's the tip.
That's a while
Pioli has certain games with the teams that he manages. I know Inter when he first started out, he was winning games like by insane results too. So and I think his biggest margin of victory at Milan was against Torino when Rebic had that hat trick. But yeah, so you're feeling good about him against Di Francesco?
I'm trying to be positive. That said, Frosinone do have an interesting crop of players. They did loan quite a few players from Juventus, Napoli, Atalanta, Real Madrid, even Ibrahimovic at Frosinone is from Bayern Munich.
Yeah.
So they've got quite an interesting squad. I wouldn't say ambitious because they're all from loan and they're all kids.
Of course, yeah.
But
it's progressive. It's not your typical. They're not like Salernitana who are just
but they're also showing too. They're not just trying to. Hey, we're just happy to be here, and we're going to be a team that is, well, if we get relegated, we get relegated. I think they're trying to show that they want to have staying power and they want to stay up.
Mm-hmm.
And they play good football as well, so that's something to be aware of.
This guy, Saj, Giancarlo Simic, not related to Giancarlo, our friend on Twitter. Despite that, I'm not gonna lie, I gave Carlos some good ideas, just in case there might be a mistake. Listen, we know he's highly touted as a youngster. He's done very well at Primavera so far. I thought he looked, again, it's preseason, but I thought he really looked exceptional. And there's certain things that you want to take away, and he was very calm and composed at that moment in time in which he got that opportunity, regardless of who plays for Real Madrid or what month it took place. And it's just nice and refreshing to see from a youngster, especially at this position. They might not have a choice, Saj. Are you okay with this, or do you prefer some type of different back line where we're seeing rumors of Teo in a back three with Tomori, and who knows, that third center back might just be Calabria at that point, or Florenzi? Would you start Simic in a back four?
So I did see not the rumors. Matteo Moretto pretty much confirmed that we did try Teo as a centre back, but I think we will play him as centre back by the time the game ends. If that makes sense. So I do think Simic will start the game. So that said, when we did watch Simic play in preseason, he did very well in the first half versus Real Madrid. But then once they brought their big guns, it's not surprising that we conceded afterwards. And then against Juventus, when he got subbed on, I think he did pretty well then.
It was interesting because Milan, I remember that Real Madrid game. This was the Pioli stuff. Pioli played like guys like 70-something minutes, and like Real Madrid were like bringing on fresh players in July. Yeah, so sorry. Go ahead.
Also, then in the Primavera this season, he's been doing really well in the Champions League, which is actually, PSG and Dortmund have some of the best academies in the world, and he did really well there. Also, in the league, the only 2 games Milan didn't win were the 2 games that Simic was not available. So maybe there's something to him. Hopefully, and we see the next big thing. That said,
so you're saying this injury crisis is a good thing for Milan because Simic will be the next day.
We did see Gabbia and Bartesaghi recently as well, and they didn't really convince.
Yeah, Bartesaghi, I think, was
left back.
I think he was the reason Magnan got that red card because he didn't properly come out or head the ball back to him. But I mean, listen, he's 17, 18 years old.
True.
So.
He's also doing well for his national team as well, and so fingers crossed. Hopefully he's good. He did join us just last year. Maybe Moncada has something cooking for us. That's the plan.
Chef it up cooking, man. Hey,
Oh,
mate. Hey, listen, Moncada, you got to say, really lackluster when it comes to offensive talent, but the defensive talent and the eye there has been pretty good. I mean, Kalulu's been strong. We love what we see from Chow prior to that injury. So I really like where he's gone there. Sant'Angelo, there's some positivity, right, guys? Benacer, we're talking about some, like influx of, something, anything. I would be surprised if it's anything 20 minutes or longer. Your real quick thoughts on Benacer. Obviously, you already thought there's going to be a draw for this before you head out. So final thoughts with Benacer and everything before we end the episode.
Yeah, it's refreshing, man. This is a player that I loved. With the hype about his move was awesome when he moved to Milan. He won the AFCON Player of the Tournament for Algeria. They won the tournament that year. There was a lot of buzz and excitement, and this is a difference maker in the midfield. He was a difference maker for us on many occasions in the Scudetto winning season. He's essentially the last of the three, right? He's the last of that three core midfield that we had in that title winning season, right? Cassie's gone, Tonali's gone. Like Benacer is the guy that I think can come into this team and really make a difference. I mean, we know the impact he can have. We know how great of a ball carrier he is, how elusive he is. In possession, how he's very press resistant. But I think I want to throw it over to you guys real quickly. I know you said, Martino, like 15, 20 minutes is probably what we can cap him out, and we're going to ease him back in. When he's ready, what would your ideal midfield three be with Benacer? Would it be Loftus-Cheek, Reinders? Would it be Musa? Would it be Adli? What do you think?
So me personally, and Sasha, I'll just say real quick: Reinders, Benacer, Loftus-Cheek.
Okay.
Like that.
Completely agree. I don't think I really like Adli, but I don't think he's starter material. He should always be first choice sub. Someone who
I agree with what you're saying. So I almost forgot about some of the questions. But Matt, any other final things that you just wanted to say? We can't really read some of these questions, Antonio. I don't give a shit. Okay, so you could if you listen long enough, bro. I'm not reading some of the stuff that you said. So with that, I think one of the comments was that's good and pertains to what you were just saying, Saj. Krunic, would you sell him outright in January?
He should have been gone in the summer.
Because
if there's a player that doesn't want to be here, I think you should let him go, especially for his age. I don't think he really fits in.
And he wants a lot of money too.
He wants more money, yeah.
And I think Pioli wants to keep him for some reason. I didn't get that.
Yeah, you know how managers go with certain players that they love at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean that was the only question that is kind of relevant for this match. I apologize to everyone else with that, but yeah. So again, I think Krunic, I totally agree with Adli. From what I heard and read from this Dortmund match, that Adli looked immediately better than some of the other options that were there, and everyone's like, how is it possible that he's still not getting minutes? But again, I digress with that.
On the bench for an entire year over with Pobega starting over him. It's criminal. I just don't get it.
It's unfortunate. Matt, any other work coming out that you have that people should be on the lookout for, aside from your handles that we've been showing at AC Milan Bros and Angelo?
I put out an article last weekend on Camarda after he made his debut. So you guys can read on that. Just kind of my kind of input on him in his moment, but also the expectations and ultimately how us fans and how we hope that we can kind of take care of him and not give him these sort of unfair expectations because he is still a kid. That was for Football Italia, so you guys can go check that out. Anything else I'm working on, you guys can follow me on Twitter at Matt_Sant'Angelo. I'll be dropping it there.
Awesome. Saj, you pronounce your Twitter handle because I'm not.
You could only find me on Saturnian13. I think my name's floating down at the bottom, and I like my anonymity, hence why I haven't shown my face. But thanks for having me on.
Of course, no,
Awesome.
love you. It's always great to talk. I mean, I talk to you almost every day. So, so at that point, again, I don't think. Well, we're not gonna have your brother on, so a lot of people are still not gonna believe that. So I'm gonna leave them up to their conspiracy theories about you guys being one person. So even though I know the truth and I won't reveal. But again, yeah, guys, that Milan podcast, Saj, again, it's that Milan podcast, the State of Play podcast. Unfortunately, it's no more. Pet, Matt, and I are obviously still great friends. So it's just unfortunate that project hasn't worked out. But again, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you like to listen to us on there. And again, obviously, every full episode gets uploaded here. From now on, we're probably going to be Fridays for the time being. And if anything ever changes, we'll let you guys know. We're probably going to go live. I'm going to go live at the very least tomorrow after the Frosinone match. Hopefully it comes with some positivity there. Any other final thoughts from the two of you before we head out or no?
Score predictions?
Yeah, Sant'Angelo had a draw. I think, what did I say? I tweeted out 3-2 Milan win. Sule got 2 goals. Simic has a goal line clearance, and Camarda scores the winner. Is what I did, and that's just a crazy one. But you could go for yours.
I'm going for the exact same thing. 3-2. I think Simic is gonna be either really good or really surprising.
Really bad. How many? Oh yeah, quick. How about this question? If we see Camarda, I think Camarda absolutely features in this one, especially if Jovic is struggling. Again, shocker. How many minutes for Camarda, guys?
15.
Yeah,
10.
I think 15 would be shocking. I think we'll go around 10 again. But
He came on in the 83rd minute, and then he had 7 minutes of an injury.
That's true. Yeah. With this, I think this might be Camarda's last appearance for 2023. I do think when we let him, kind of marinate a little bit more, it was just an injury crisis now, and obviously the suspension with Giroud. When they go back to 3 options, I don't think they're going to be using him. I think he needs to grow further at the youth level. But other than that, Saj, we appreciate you so much for coming on. Again, everyone, go and follow him there. The link is in the description. I want to again shout out to Smelly Morelli, by the way. The Rafael Leao sweatshirt came in. It looks great. I gave him this idea. Art, I don't give a shit if you're going to refute it. I told you in the DMs. Do something with surfing. He did. I held up my end of the bargain. I purchased it. It was great. I think he has t-shirt versions of it as well. I'll have that link in the description as well as Saj's Twitter. The article linking to Maldini's interview with Sempre Milan as well. Other than that, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
thank you very much. Bye.